Good morning and welcome to our Distinguished Sales Speakers Series event. My name is Sherry Mercurio and I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Community Relations here at Franklin University. It's my honor to help host this series, which is funded through the generosity of a Franklin alumnus who really identified a need for sales education, not training, as a means to create sustainable economic futures across all industries. Through his generosity, we bring you this free series and our new MS in Professional Sales Leadership program, a 14-month, 100% online program to help you build your business acumen and use technology to inform decision-making. Designed in collaboration with nationally recognized sales experts, the program unites psychology, business analytics, and emotional intelligence to inform sales leadership strategy. As we move from our monthly one-hour sessions to our new quarterly workshop offerings, I'm excited to welcome Jeff Bloomfield to kick off our first workshop. As a former sales and marketing executive, farm boy, and cancer survivor, Jeff uses his inspiring style and compelling life story to share how to communicate with more purpose, power, and impact. He uses the science behind the biology of change resistance to tap into authentic communication superpowers to be a more influential communicator in any setting, be it personal or professional. After being the first person in his blue-collar family to graduate from college, Jeff spent his corporate career in biotechnology, where he led several product launches for genetic cancer therapies, one of which was for brain cancer. It was here that Jeff discovered the power of neuroscience and the fact that no one he knew in corporate America really understood how the brain worked. This realization put into motion his new mission to teach others what he learned about the brain and how to apply that information as professional communicators, particularly in leadership, sales, and marketing. Jeff now spends the majority of his time speaking to organizations and conferences on the secrets of the buying brain and how to build and deliver compelling messaging that creates instant trust, clear contrast, and an urgency to change. His approach must work because Jeff's most recent book, NeuroSelling, vaulted to bestseller status in the first week it was released. Before I hand the virtual microphone over to Jeff, I want to share a housekeeping item. I ask everyone to hold their questions until the end of the presentation. However, go ahead, add them to the chat along the way so you don't lose track of them, and we'll be sure to address them at the end of the session. Also, at the conclusion of today's presentation, each of you will receive a survey. If you can take a moment to fill those out, I would appreciate it. Your feedback helps us to really help with future planning and to ensure that we're meeting your expectations. And with that, please help me in welcoming Jeff Bloomfield.
Well, good morning. I think for most of us it's morning, so it's good to be with you all. And it's also good to be with you all for a little bit of an extended period of time. I was very honored to be contacted by Sherry and Aaron and asked to be part of this program. I know this is a program that's been ongoing, but we wanted to turn it a little bit more into a workshop and less of more of a didactic lecture series. And so I'm really honored to be with you all to do that. I'm also honored to be with you all because I'm right down the road from most of you. I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and you're going to hear some of my story in a little bit, that I actually grew up a little bit closer to you than maybe someone would have realized. So my goal for us today is, as a team, as a group, it's virtual. And I know that we're still kind of coming out of that COVID period where we've got a little bit of Zoom fatigue. So I'm going to try to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to ask you to do some things along the way. I'm going to ask some questions from an interactivity standpoint. Throw your answers into the chat. We've got the monitor set up here, right? I've got the Tony Robbins big board. I can see all your lovely faces, the pictures that I see. And even if you come on and go on camera, I can see all of you. We're going to keep track of everything. And at the end, towards the end of the program, we're going to get into some really practical tools and some tool builders where I'm literally going to teach you and walk you through the exact exercises that we do with a lot of our Fortune 500 companies from across the globe to implement a lot of these strategies that you'll be able to put into practice the minute you turn your camera off. So that's our goal for today. Now, I'm going to share my screen with you, but what I want to stress is, so because this is virtual, I don't know if some of my magic works as well as it does live. So we're going to find out today. So what I do when I do live keynotes around the world is I always like to test the group initially to find out if all of this kind of voodoo that we do when it comes to neuroscience effectiveness from a communication standpoint translates as effectively virtually as it does in a live room of this many people. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Once you get your pen and paper out, be ready to go, locked and loaded. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do, though, is an exercise that you only do with your mind. You're going to have to follow directions, maybe do a little bit of math, no cheating on this one. So I want you to think in your mind of a number for this group, let's say between 2 and 10. Then I want you to visualize that number in your mind. Picture it. Okay, now take that number. I want you to multiply that number by 9. And I want you to visualize your answer. Now, as you're visualizing that answer, I want you to add those 2 digits together to get a new number. And visualize that number. Visualize it. Picture it right in your mind. Okay, from that number, I want you to subtract 5. We're starting some heavy math, aren't we? Hopefully you're visualizing a number at this point, and you've got that number in your mind. Now we're going to figure out which letter of the alphabet corresponds to your number. If A equals 1, B equals 2, follow the alphabet till you land on the letter that corresponds to your number. Now we're going to go quick. Think of that letter, visualize it. Think of the first country that pops in your mind that starts with that letter. Picture the word. The last letter of your country, think of an animal that starts with that letter. Picture that word. Now, the last letter of your animal, think of a color that starts with that letter. Picture that word. Now, everybody in chat, I want you to tell me what you're thinking of, but I'm guessing right now, raise your hand in chat or put it in there if you're thinking of an orange kangaroo in Denmark. I should hear this, hopefully, this big gasp of everyone. So did everybody get an orange kangaroo in Denmark as your answer? Thumbs up, yes, yes, okay, great. This is fascinating as the no. So we have a no in there. So somebody either wasn't following directions or they're a divergent thinker. So we're going to get into some of that as well. I'm curious, did you have a koala, Jay? Did Jay have a koala instead of a kangaroo? Yes, there you go. Okay, so we have some divergent thinkers in the room, and we're going to talk about that, how that works, how the mind processes information, especially when you have time constraints and habits, convergent thinking that you're used to. Here's your next test. I want you to look at the screen, and you're going to solve a maze with nothing but your eyes, going from start to finish. And then I want you to throw in chat, thumbs up or hand as soon as you solved it. Nothing but your eyes, go from start to finish. Put in the chat, done, thumbs up, as soon as you got it. Okay, you guys are pretty quick. It's a sharp group, Sherry. I'm seeing some thumbs up on the screens. That's good. Done. Wow, all right, it's a fast processing group. So I got to figure out how fast your processors are. If your processors are too slow, I got to take this thing a lot slower. But you guys are pretty fast processors. So I'm curious, how many of you, this was your path? Give me that thumbs up again. Now, isn't it interesting? The majority of us, this was our path. Now, for some of you, you might have thought about going a different path. Did anybody think to go this way? Like, what is it? Who is this guy? Who brought this guy on? I mean, they brought this guy on for this? Come on, what is this? Did anybody think to go this way? So here's why I do this little exercise, because 95% of the folks that I speak to, even when I speak to a room of 1,000 people, they tend to go the very first way. And the reason we tend to go that way is why? Because that's how we've been trained to solve a maze. Did I tell you there were rules to solving this maze? No, the only instructions were, I want you to solve it with nothing but your eyes going from start to finish and tell me when you're done. Your habits and the programming taught you to go through the maze that way. I'm going to tell you a little story. This is going to really kick us off and launch us where we're going to go today. So Dr. George Land, back in the late 1960s, he was hired by NASA, and they wanted to find out why some astronauts were amazing, creative, problem-solving geniuses and others were just average. So he created this amazing assessment, put all the astronauts through it, raving success. NASA was so thrilled with the results that they asked Dr. Land to give it to the population, especially children, to see if they could identify our best future astronauts. So Dr. Land went out and he gave it to 1,600 4- and 5-year-olds. Same test, essentially stratified for their age. Now, here's your next question. I want you to put your answer in chat. Of the 1,600 4- and 5-year-old kids, what percentage do you think scored at the very top of the astronaut assessment as creative, imaginative, problem-solving geniuses? What percentage do you think of the 1,600? 1%, 95, 95, 95, 99, 5. Okay, so we got both ends of the spectrum here. Okay, we got everything from 99 to 1. Would you believe, keep going, we got it, okay. People are gonna, we're tracking. Would you believe that the results were 98%. So for those of you who are in the 90 pluses, you're tracking here. Of the 1,600 4 and 5-year-olds, 98% of them scored at the top of the assessment. So they were so fascinated by this result, they decided to follow these kids and test them every 5 years to see if anything changed. So 5 years later, 9 and 10 years old, they retested them. Now, what percentage do you think still scored at the top of the assessment? What do you think? Did it drop? Did it go up? Can't go up much. I see some people tracking down, much lower. Exactly. It went to 30%. And so since you're all smart people and clearly fast processors from our previous exercises, I'll start giving away the answers. They followed them 5 more years, 14 and 15. As you can imagine, it went to 12. By the time they were adults, 2%. So here's a question. What do you think Dr. Land found was the root cause that had this trend go from where they were 4 and 5 years old, 98% of them were imaginative, creative, problem-solving geniuses, essentially. And by the time they were adults, they were morons. What do you think was the number one determining root cause factor of this trend line that Dr. Land found? What do you think? Throw it in chat. Franz says, shaping the mind through education and religion, rules, adulting, adult input. So it did have a lot to do with their environment, but the number one, and Franz is onto something there, it was actually through the education system. Now, I'm going to temper this a little bit because I'm here representing Franklin University, right? Which they do it much differently here, which is great. Here's what if you think about it, what happens at 4 and 5 years old? We enter into our public or private education system in America. And how do we do that? Memorization, regurgitation, take the test, pass the test, check the box, move on to the next grade. See, our education system was built off the back of the Industrial Revolution process. We built our education system to match that of how we trained a factory worker. And it's never really improved. Now, in some places, we do try to improve that. But what Dr. Land found in the study was it created this trend in our culture where we became convergent thinkers versus the divergent human beings that we are actually biologically designed to be. And if you think about back to when you were 4 and 5 years old, for some of us, that was a lot longer than others ago. But if you think about that, we were imaginative problem-solving geniuses. I mean, there wasn't anything we couldn't think creatively about. You know, a towel as a cape, and you just had all kinds of great ideas. And they weren't all things that were built in reality, but we weren't afraid to think outside the box. And because of our education system, our culture, our society, by the time we're adults, we become convergent thinkers. That's the bad news. The good news is Dr. Land found that you don't lose it. It's just been suppressed. Why do I start the session off with this concept? Because as you think about the way that you've been trained in a lot of ways in your life, we're going to go after the number one determining success factor for you as it relates to this and where we're going to go. What do you think the number one determining success factor is of any organization, but specifically any individual inside that organization? What do you think the number one determining success factor is? Throw it in chat. You all probably work for a company. What do you think it is? Attitude? By the way, when I ask this question, as you're putting your answers, when I ask this question in front of large groups, I get a lot of the same answers. People, I get production, I get attitude, I get strategy, I get culture. But Rachel Resendez, you get the gold star today. Stay with me on this now. Number one determining success factor of an organization, and you as an individual within it, is the ability to communicate effectively. Doesn't matter how good your culture is, doesn't matter how good your solutions, products are, how good your strategy is, none of that matters if you cannot communicate effectively externally to the marketplace you serve and internally, peer-to-peer, coaching conversations, etc. Now, think about this personally, because one of the things I really love about what we teach at Brain Trust is everything you're going to learn over the next period of the next hour or so will apply just as practically to your personal life as it does to your professional life. Think about all the times in your life, personally or professionally, when there's been either lack of results that you were desiring or conflict. What can you trace it back to? Probably poor communication, misinterpretation, something where the communication broke down. So now here's a big question. We asked this a lot around here of a lot of the executives we work with when we first engage with them. Can you think of the number one best program you've ever been through in your career or your life that taught you effective communication skills? Think about it. No, not sales training, because that's not really effective. Not even coaching frameworks. Communication effectiveness, coaching and training. We don't have it. It's not. We have communication courses. Is that what you mean? No. I mean situational communication effectiveness. It doesn't exist, yet it's the number one determining success factor of you as an individual and the organization you work for. So as we go through this, I want you to think about the habits that you have in your life. One of my favorite world figures of all time, Paul of Tarsus, was one of probably the best, greatest missionary in the history of the world. He was telling the Romans back in 59 AD, because they kind of got stuck, the Roman Empire had kind of gotten stuck in their habits. They were dominating, they got a little arrogant. And he was saying, hey, you got to quit conforming to these patterns, because you're not going to be able to learn anything new. You got to transform the way you think if you want to transform the way you behave. To me, the habits of communication are critical. Learning the habits you have, and are they good or bad? And then creating new habits of communication, if they're not good, are really, really effective. Now, the habit concept has been a little bit of a buzz around culture for the last probably 10 years, but I want to just settle on something for a second. So the habit loop, and I want you to just reflect on this in your own personal life. Something happens in your life, you have a cue. That cue then triggers subconsciously for you to do something, routine, behavior, etc. You do that because your brain perceives that you're going to get some type of reward for that behavior, and then you lather, rinse, repeat. Think about your morning routine. When your alarm goes off in the morning, just process through that for a second. What's your routine? My guess is it's 90+% consistent day after day after day. Why? Because your brain has conditioned itself. For those of you who get up and the first thing you do is look at your phone, why do you do that? The cue is the alarm went off. That's your cue. Your brain goes, oh, I use my phone for my alarm. You pick up your phone, you turn it off, the alarm off, but then you're like, I'm up. Might as well check email. Might as well check social media. Might as well check this. Most of us have gotten to a habit of doing that before we even go to the bathroom, because our brain is giving us that dopamine reward for that. Now, this is just one example of it. I want us to focus in on situational communication. When you are communicating with another human being, period, whether it's in a sales conversation, coaching conversation, a conversation with your spouse or significant other, a parenting conversation, you'll have cues that happen. Those cues are subconscious, you don't realize it. And then you will respond based on habit. You may not be responding the best way. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that works. So hopefully you're kind of thinking about some of these patterns and these habits you have in your mind. And here's what that looks like. This is a neural network. And the way the brain works is when you have a thought about something, even subconsciously, two neurons begin to communicate. They begin to fire together. And if I keep thinking that thought or acting that thought out or behaving in a certain way, those neurons begin to wire together. So neurons fire together, they wire together. The more frequently and often that same thought or action happens, those neurons create these trenches, these neural pathways in our mind. This is an example of not a neural pathway. It's literally just a water runoff, but it's a shallow one, right? This is a thought that you might have that's fleeting. You might have had it once or twice, and then you don't think anything of it. Glial cells come in, they clean it up, and off it goes. It doesn't create a habit, doesn't create a neural pathway. This is a habit. I like analogies. So this is one where you've been doing the same thing the same way over and over and over again. You have a lot of these type of habit pathways for driving a vehicle. You don't even have to think about it anymore. You just get in it and you show up somewhere and you don't even realize how you got there. What we want to be able to do is do these same things with the way we communicate. What prevents us from doing that, back to Dr. Land, we have been conditioned to think, act, and behave based on a series of social experiments with education in our culture that tells us that we form these habits. Many of these habits have come from where we grew up, who we were around, who influenced us as communicators. If you've not studied the art and science of communication as a skill and really worked on it as a skill, you operate communication-wise intuitively. And that intuition comes from just your childhood all the way up through where you are today, experiences, good or bad. So you're not doing it intentionally. So therefore, you're not necessarily doing it consistently well. That's what we're going to work on today. So here's what I'm going to ask you to think about. Who in your life was the most impactful at teaching you how to communicate? So for me, it was this guy, Papaw Willie Bloomfield. Now, if you don't know what a papaw is, that's a grandfather who happens to be from the South. So my papaw was from Kentucky. See, he moved up and bought the family farm when my dad was just a little boy in Mansfield, Ohio. So I told you I was nearby from you all in Columbus. Those are from Columbus. Those of you who know where the Shawshank Prison is, the famous Shawshank Redemption movie filmed at the now tourist trap of Shawshank Prison, just north of Route 30 on the north side of Mansfield. Our family farm was about 10 miles due north of that, up off of Route 13. This guy taught me, I think my next book's going to be everything I needed to know in life I learned on the farm. See, he taught me how to drive when I was 5, standing between his knees on our old green John Deere tractor. Papaw had this way about him of teaching you things through storytelling. Oh, I got somebody else from Mansfield area. All right. He taught you things like problem solvers rule the world. And it's just a Papawism. But see, Papaw believed problem solving was one part curiosity and one part creativity. He would never give you the answer to the problem. He would just make you keep asking questions until you arrived at the right answer that suited him. So problem solving, hard work and perseverance. He taught us the platinum rule. Treat other people better than they expected to be treated, son. He used to have these little Papawisms over and over again. You realize growing up on the farm that you're kind of embodying these things, and that the family matters more than anything else. I share this story because it so shaped who I am today as a human, but not necessarily exactly for why you might think. Yes, I absorbed all these from this great communicator who just had an 8th grade education from the hills of Kentucky. But on February 2nd, 1982, everything changed in my life. I got off the school bus to go see Papaw like I did every day as long as I could remember. 50-yard long gravel driveway, green Chevy Silverado that always sat at the end of it next to the white farmhouse he built with his bare hands. On February 2nd, 1982, I got off the school bus to head down that 50-yard long driveway. And instead of just his green Chevy Silverado at the end of it, it had more cars than usual. By the time I got to the porch, I wasn't allowed in. An ambulance came down that driveway. They took Papaw out on a stretcher that day. I'll never forget it. It's seared in my mind, February 2nd, 1982. It'd be the last day I get to see him alive. And why on earth would I be sharing this story with you guys? As they took him out, I realized over the next couple of days and weeks that, man, I lost my mentor in a heartbeat, but he wanted me to be the first person in our family to go to college. So it drove me to get good grades. I ended up going to college, being the first person to go directly from high school to college for my family. I ended up in the field of biotech, where I got to help commercialize a drug for lung cancer. He died of stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer. So you can start to see how your life story matters, and it all kind of comes together. And here's what I learned, though, on my journey in biotech was they were training us to be experts, credibility experts in disease state, non-small cell lung cancer and other disease states and training us up on randomized, placebo-controlled, phase 3 study data, cell biology, cell proliferation. None of this stuff matters to you. They're training us to be basically oncologists so that we could go communicate with oncologists. So if you're in a sales role today where you're being trained to be very credible because you have to go in and be an expert in an area, that's what it was like for me. But here's the rub for me was Papaw, he communicated the opposite way that I was being trained. Papaw was a teacher. He was a storyteller, not a big boisterous personality, very thoughtful teacher, storyteller. So that's how I communicated. I had no idea why. I didn't know why it worked. I just knew it was the opposite of how I was being trained. So as I kept getting promoted and people would go, how's this farm kid from Ohio keep getting promoted? All he does is tell stories. I started to recognize as I studied communicators, specifically, not through the medical lens, through the practical lens, there was something different about certain people and the way they communicated. Lo and behold, I got asked to lead a team to launch a drug for brain cancer. As I started to dive deeper into neurobiology, neuroscience, it led me down this path of looking at the technology, functional MRI, EEG, PET scans. And though my colleagues were looking at it through the lens of how the blood-brain barrier worked with our drug, I began looking at it through the lens of, wow, we can actually process information in the brain, and we can start to tell what part of the, I'm going the wrong direction, what part of the brain processes which information. This became profound to me. Because if we can take the type of information that any of us as humans are processing, and we can map it to the part of the brain that's relevant to building trust, to being willing to change, to all of those areas, we could actually start to help people communicate more effectively. Here's the questions that we know that your customers are asking subconsciously, because this is going to be the crux of where we go today, and what I want to do to help you improve some of the areas or reinforce some of the areas you're doing really, really well. Do I believe I can trust you? Do I believe I can trust you? Your customers and prospects, by the way, they're not asking this question consciously. It's all happening subconsciously. Do I believe that you actually understand what I care about? Based on how you're communicating with me, do I believe these things? Third is, do I believe that you understand the problems and challenges that impact what I care about? Again, I'm going to try to make things like Geico commercial. It's easy. Everybody knows that, Jeff. It might be simple. It might be common sense, but usually isn't common practice. So think about this for a second. They're asking this question subconsciously, every single interaction based on how you're communicating with them. The next one is, do I believe that you have the knowledge and a unique solution that's going to solve those problems better than I'm currently doing or can do somewhere else? And then lastly, do I believe that if I choose you to help me solve those problems, it's going to bring quantifiable value to me in my role, but also to my organization and what we're trying to do? If your prospects and customers aren't able to check the box, the green arrows here, every single one of them, every single time, they're likely going to delay making a decision to choose you, or they'll choose someone else. And the big word here that you notice is consistent is believe. So think about, what is a belief? If I believe something to be true, what does that mean? Right? I can take it to the bank. I can count on it. It's factual. It's validated in my mind. See, our beliefs drive our behaviors. Theirs, your customers and prospects, but also yours. What do you believe is true about communication effectiveness? What do you believe is true about the science behind it? And we're going to get into some of that. Here's the punchline. Most of you in the roles you're in today, you know how to communicate the right information, or you know at least what the right information is, because you've been taught that. That's all the stuff that I was talking about when I was back in biotech that they taught us. Most of you can deliver it the right way, meaning this is how marketing says we should talk about it. This is how my sales manager says we should deliver it. Here's our sales script, all that. Most of you can deliver it the way your company says to deliver it. But what we have found, and why our organization continues to have explosive growth, is across the globe, when we work with large companies, nearly every single salesperson, regardless of how long they've been doing it, is doing it in the wrong order. So it's not just about the right information, the right way. It's got to be done in the right order. And when you can do that, you change entirely the way it's processed in the brain. So let's dive in. Let's have a little bit of fun. Now, as you go along, if you're having questions about any of the things that I'm about to talk about, just throw them in the chat, and Jenny from my team will grab them. And at the end, we'll address each question. Just know at the end, we're also going to be doing some exercises where you're going to be able to come off mute, ask questions as we go, and build as well. But we'll cover a lot of those as we go. So if you think about what our job is in the sales profession, is to get someone to change behavior, right? We either want them to buy more of what we're selling them, or to switch to us initially. So Dr. BJ Fogg, who I've had on my podcast, is a great thought leader. He's also this PhD research partner out of Stanford. He has the change activation model, the behavioral model. And what he found is that humans will change as a factor of how motivated are they versus how hard or easy do they believe the change is. And obviously, if I have lower motivation and I think what you're asking me to do is too hard, I'm not changing. This applies to your personal life as much as the professional life. It applies to you personally just as much as to your prospects and customers. So at some point, though, my motivation to change is high enough, and my brain's perception of how hard or easy it is, it becomes easy enough for me to perceive I can change. I'll cross that curve. That's that change or behavioral change activation curve. And what precedes that, though, for us as communicators, is awareness. And what I mean by that is are you aware that you should even be thinking about doing anything different? You personally. What about your customers? So see, what I'll do, and I'll just kind of get you behind the wizard curtain here. When I talk to groups like this, as clunky as it can be sometimes in a virtual setting, my job is still to communicate to you in a way that gets you curious. If I get you curious, I raise your level of awareness. If I raise your level of awareness and I can use some neuroscience to start to elevate your motivation, you're now interested in potentially adopting some communication changes. But then if I make it too hard, you'll be like, oh, we like that guy. You know, he thought he was funny. He really wasn't, but he was, you know, whatever. But he had some interesting points and some things I hadn't thought about. And yeah, I think I should do some of those things a little bit differently. But the way he told us to do it at the end was so complicated, I couldn't do it. So you go back to your own status quo. And by the way, 80% of you on this call will leave this call and you will go back to your status quo, because that's what the stats tell us. But 20 to 30% potentially will actually take some of these things and immediately start to implement them, because you see how much more effective they're going to be at helping you get to where you're trying to go. The big question that the prospects are asking, and you're probably asking of me right now, is to change. Here's the rub is below the curve. Your brain is going, is this too risky to change? He's asking me to do something different, or she's asking me to do something different. How risky is it based on what I'm currently doing? And if your brain perceives it's too risky, you're not changing. But our job as professional communicators, which everyone on this call is, by the way, everyone is a professional communicator, is can I get you to see that it's actually riskier if you don't change? And we're going to talk a little bit about the science and psychology behind that in a minute. But none of it matters if this question doesn't get answered affirmative. How much do I trust the person who's asking me to change? See, the difficult part when you don't know a person, like you don't know me. So you're trusting that Franklin University vetted me. You're trusting that they think that I'm credible on this topic. Yeah, the guy wrote a couple of books, and oh yeah, he's the founder and CEO of a company. Yeah, but you look at my credibility and you automatically think, okay, we must be somewhat credible, or they wouldn't have brought him on. But the way I communicate with you, then interpersonally, there's still a part of you that has to trust me personally, or you're still going to kind of resist. See, that's the same thing when we're facing with our customers, is we got to go through that same process. So I'm going to answer some of these questions for you because they're just so easy that I know you'll get them right. People buy from people and brands they gave you the hint already. Trust. They trust people and brands they what? This one I want you to answer. Throw this one in the chat. I'm going to re-engage you in the chat. Wake up, everybody. Come on, people. They buy from people and brands they trust. They trust people and brands they look at. Rachel coming right off the top rope with like. So Clemia, I would say a lot of people say no. Ooh, a lot of people are saying no. Here's the question. Do you trust everyone you know? You do not. But Rachel got it right. We do trust people and brands that we like. Now, we like people and brands we what with? Who knows that one? What do you think? So we buy from people and brands we trust people and brands we like people and brands we, okay, agree with. Ashley, that's good. Brian and Rachel, nailed it. Connect with. So this is, again, a little bit of a no-dust slide, but think about this for a second. In order for me to trust you, I have to like you. In order for me to like you, I have to connect with you. Now, some of you might be going, I don't know that I completely believe that I have to like you to trust you. Stay with me on this a second. Here's the other one. People buy from people and brands they trust. They trust people and brands they respect. And they respect people and brands they find credible. Now, when I started studying the brain, particularly around this topic of trust, I wish I would have known this way back when I was in corporate America. I would have been a much better leader. I didn't realize it, but there's actually two different types of trust. So one part of trust, this is our periodic table of trust. So if all my science majors are on here, just forgive me. I created this. Okay, it's made up. Don't give me any flack about it. No, this is a periodic table of trust. On the right side is if you communicate with me in a way that I think my perception of you is that you're knowledgeable, skillful, capable, you bring insights that are relevant to me, I'm going to trust you from a credibility standpoint. Okay, so professional trust. Now, the other side of that periodic table, if you communicate with me in a way that I find you authentic, honest, humble, Oh, there's a block missing. And no one likes this block, by the way. But it's the activator of personal trust. With just the right amount of vulnerability. Now, not the kind of vulnerability where at the end you're like, I think this person needs counseling. You don't want your prospect to ever think that, this is a Dr. Phil episode, but enough vulnerability really activates that personal trust. It makes you authentic. It makes you humble. It actually, the honesty piece, it activates all of that. So I'm going to pause here for just a second because I want us to think about this in both our personal and professional lives. But if we think about it in terms of customer conversations, and then think about how much training you've had over the course of your life, period, whether you've been doing something a year or 10 years. We are trained to be credible, aren't we? We are trained to be knowledgeable, skillful, capable, and we're just hopeful that we're connectable. We're hopeful that we come across authentic and humble and honest with the right amount of vulnerability. Yet the brain demands it. It demands it. So we have to have a way of upskilling ourselves in the way we communicate that's authentic, that activates personal connection. And so the order absolutely matters. So when you think about which of those is more important, especially in a customer conversation, but just in their life in general, if you think about this, how many of you probably know somebody personally in your life that, I don't want to sound too negative, but they're kind of a know-it-all. We used to call, the one-up Wally, the person in your circle of friends that every time you go to tell a story, they've got one better. Or whenever you're around them, they know the answer to this. And they're very opinionated about everything. Like they might be credible. They might know a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, you don't necessarily really connect with them. Our customers sometimes perceive us that way and we don't even realize it because we're going there loaded for bear with credibility, with all the knowledge of what it is we're selling. We know all our facts. We know all our figures. We know all of our features. And that's our highest level of training. So when we get in front of a customer virtually or live, we want to make sure that they know that we know that stuff. And we're going to show you why that might be detrimental to your success. So here's a fun little sales trust matrix. I'm a movie fan. I love movies. And I'm going to go date myself a little bit with my movie references here. But let's just say that these 4 people are 4 different salespeople inside of your company. Salesperson A, as we talked about on the 2 types of trust, not very connecting, low EQ, pretty self-serving, and they're actually not very knowledgeable. They don't really know a whole lot. So we'll call this person Lloyd. So for all of my Dumb and Dumber fans out there, would you be buying from Lloyd if he was calling on you from a salesperson standpoint? Probably not. Low connection, low credibility. Let's go down the x-axis to our salesperson B. Thank you, Sherry. Salesperson B, this person is actually really likable, pretty connectable, authentic, humility. It's all there. You like them, but they don't know anything. Let's call this person Tommy. And by the way, I'll pause for a second. If you're in the field of sales, and I know this is an older movie, but if you've never watched the movie Tommy Boy and you're in the field of sales, you are definitely doing yourself a disservice. I still believe it's one of the greatest sales movies of all time. So Tommy was very likable, but not very credible. Thank you, Rachel, for your agreement. We are in agreement. So now, if you remember the movie, Tommy had an alter ego. David Spade's character, Richard. Richard was the opposite, highly credible. He knew all the manufacturing process of the cadmium-coated brake pads, right? But no one liked him. No one liked him, not connectable. So if you think about those 2, would you buy from Tommy? The answer is usually maybe. Maybe if you're selling something that nobody really cares about from a credibility standpoint, it's a commodity, it's easy, and I like you, I'll buy from you. It's the old Girl Scout cookie effect, right? I'm always going to buy from my neighbor's daughter because we like them. We like her. We don't need her to tell us the manufacturing process of a do-si-do. We just like her, so we'll buy from her. It's up in the left quadrant where our friend David Spade's character, Richard, is where we run into trouble. Many of us come across to our customers as Richard, and we don't realize it because we're only communicating from a position of credibility. So obviously what we're going to do is teach you how to go up into the right axis here, or the right quadrant in the sales suite zone. I put Warren Buffett there and Oprah. Maybe Oprah lost a little credibility during this whole Hawaii thing, but I won't step on anyone's toes on that one. Point is, they're both incredibly successful, incredible, and they're usually very connecting and connectable. We want your picture to be up in the upper right-hand quadrant, but how you communicate really matters. And this isn't what you think, by the way. If I ask you your last 10 customer meetings for the customer to put your face on this quadrant, where would they put you? That's what really matters. Okay. So here's where we're going to go with this. We work with a lot of companies in a lot of different industries. And what we find is across industries, your customers tend to put you in categories. You may not even realize it. By the way, we do a ton of customer research, insights research, so we know this. Many times they're going to put you into one of three categories. They're going to consider you a vendor, they're going to consider you a consultant, or they may or may not consider you an advisor or a trusted advisor. Now, if you're, how do you know? You remember the old Jeff Foxworthy, you're a redneck if, now I'm from Kentucky, remember my roots go to Kentucky, so I can use those jokes. You're a vendor if, and I like to put in here, like here lies vendor RFP. If you have to respond to a ton of RFPs and you're not influencing the spec on those RFPs, you might be a vendor. If you don't have the relational capital to get the customer to call you for advice before they ever put anything into play for an RFP, you might be a vendor. If you don't have those kind of relationships, you're kind of stuck and you're commoditizing yourself. Now, move to the middle. If you're a consultant, that means that they do trust you, and they're asking for your advice and input before they're doing and making decisions many times, but not all the time. Better to be that than a vendor. But what we want to really move to is, how do we be a trusted advisor where they don't make a lot of decisions in your area of expertise without consulting you first? That's the level that you see that you must be at as a sales professional. And we're going to talk about how to get there. I think there we go. Which are you? All right. So let's get into some fun. So now we're going to go through just enough. By the way, the program I'm taking you through today is a program that in corporate America, it takes us 2+ days and 6 months worth of coaching to get through. And we've been asked to turn this entire thing into an MBA program itself, course in and of itself. So I'm trying not to give you too much of the fire hose effect or the 10 pounds of rocks in a 5-pound bag. Hopefully you're taking a lot of notes here and you're starting to think about how all this might apply. So this is now where the rubber meets the road. The 3 disciplines of decision-making. And this is through our research with our PhD partners, using the technology and then applying it in our conversations. The first one is the biology. We'll talk about that. The second is the physiology. And then lastly, we've got the psychology. So there's a lot of stuff out there on the psychology side of buying. There's a little bit on physiology and less than, but still a little bit on biology. But there's hardly anything that puts all 3 of these disciplines together. That's what NeuroSelling really is. It's how do you take the best of these 3 disciplines, put them together in how we inform, how we are training you all to communicate more effectively. So I'm going to give you the cliff notes of each section. All right, the biology. So with biology, the work's been done over decades on this, but the last 10 to 20 years, we've gotten a lot more granularity through technology. And so I'm going to simplify it for you that forget about left brain, right brain. Just forget about that. Throw that out of your mind. Yes, the brain has 2 hemispheres, but it's become so convoluted psychologically in what it means to us that it's really not helpful. What we believe, and the research shows, is it's using the networks of the brain is much more helpful. See, the brain has 2 primary networks. The analytical network, this is the area of your brain, the neocortex. Some of you I know have done some of this work or been and heard other speakers who've talked about this to some degree or another. This is your thinking brain. Your analytical network's primary responsibility biologically is evaluation, comparison, analysis. It's your rational thinking. It's where language is stored, but also where you tend to trigger a little bit of judgment, skepticism. Really powerful part of the brain, obviously. We need it. It's hugely important in decision-making, but it might surprise you what its role is in a second. So analytical network, thinking brain. Then we'll go to the emotional empathic network. Now, by the way, a lot of the work that we've done here with Dr. Dan Doherty, our president at our company, has been done out of in concert with a lot of folks. We're out the road in 71 at Case Western Reserve with the emotional intelligence folks and Richard Boyatzis and Goldman, et cetera. So, and Dr. Tony Jack's the one who helped us validate this information. This is important, obviously. The emotional empathic network of the brain is the feeling and instinctive areas of our brain. So think about that, where your long-term memories are stored. Feelings and emotions emanate from this part of the brain. Trust. Trust is not a thought. Trust is a feeling. Internal visualization happens here. So if I ask you to close your eyes and picture, earlier I asked you to picture the math you were doing in your head and the numbers and the words, you were using this part of your brain. If I ask you to close your eyes and picture the house you grew up in, or the trailer or the condo or the apartment you spent the most time in as a child, you could picture that. That's the internal visualization mechanism of your brain. Powerful part of your brain. And then the subconscious behaviors like breathing functions, avoidance, safety, survival. That's the instinctive part of our brain here in the emotional empathic network. You might otherwise hear the limbic system or the R complex and root brain. Now, here we go. Here's the question. Analytical network, emotional empathic network. Analytical network, emotional empathic network. As we've done the research, here's a couple interesting things we've learned. You can't activate them at the same time. You can only vacillate between the two. They're separate functions. So based on how I'm communicating with you, your brain's either active in the analytical network or it's active in the emotional empathic network, never at the same time. Now they can vacillate quickly between each other, right? They can communicate quickly between themselves, but never simultaneously. So how do you think we make decisions? Do you think some people make analytical decisions and some people make emotional empathic decisions? What do you think? Throw it in the chat. How do you think we make decisions? Which area of the brain is primarily responsible for how we make decisions? Analytical, emotional. Analytical or emotional? Jay, I got a combination. I've got emotional. Interestingly enough, as we've studied this, and Jay's kind of right, and also I'm gonna clarify a little bit with what that means. You might think that you're analytical, that your style is analytical, so you make more analytical decisions. Some of you might think, well, no, I'm more of that creative. So you're falling back into that left and right brain myth if you think that. Every human being, at least that we've studied, which is thousands upon thousands across the planet, makes decisions the same way, and it's inside out. We activate decisions in the emotional empathic network, and then we validate with the facts, figures, information. Think about that order. Now, some of you are like, well, yeah, but analytical network and emotional. Every decision you make to do anything has to have an emotional trigger that validates in the analytical network. Whatever it is, you only do something because you're emotionally connected. The meaning behind why you would take action is something. There's an emotional relevance to that initially that gets activated. Then you're recruiting information to try to justify and validate why you did it, good or bad. So now think about how you've been trained to communicate with customers. And that's right, Sunita, one after the other. Emotional empathic, analytical. So let's pause for a second. Let's talk about this in communication with our customers. Think about how we've been trained. What's your highest level of training? It's probably product. Your company, your logos, facts, figures, features, right? When you show up under pressure, you're going to communicate from your highest level of training. If I communicate all of that information, by its very nature, I have to activate your analytical network. So I'm actually activating the part of your brain that's not only not responsible for making the decision, it's actually responsible for evaluation, comparison, analysis, judgment, and skepticism. In the event, some of you right now might be thinking, well, yeah, but I mean, I've sold a lot, and I'm pretty much, I give a lot of information. I'm doing pretty well. You're allowing the customer to do all the work. See, if you're selling to me only through my analytical network, I have to process all that information. Oh, and by the way, I have to pay attention to it long enough to then take it, shove it in my emotional empathic network to determine if it has any emotional value to me. And if by chance I've hung on long enough to reach this part of the story. Then I'm like, okay, maybe it does. Then I've got to process it back up in my analytical network to reevaluate it, whether there's enough validity, confirmation for me to make a decision. So that going outside to inside to back outside is so much of a further decision-making process that it consumes so many calories in the brain that most of our prospects stop listening because we actually activated the wrong part of the brain in the wrong order. So hopefully you can start to see where this is kind of going, right? This is really important. And if we're looking to help someone change, the emotional empathic network is the only area of the brain that's actually open to new ideas. Biologically, the analytical network is not open to new ideas because it doesn't even understand what that means. It's a validator, an evaluator. New ideas are emotional. So hopefully you can start to see where this is kind of going. So take that concept, networks, for a second, and then we're going to add to it the idea of some physiology. This is going to be really important to us because as we go through this, understanding that there's the structure of the brain, now understanding that when you and I are communicating, there's physiology happening. There's neurochemistry happening. So how many neurons, throw this in the chat, how many neurons do you think the average human brain has? What's your guess? $2 billion. I got billions, 2 billion, 74 billion. I like the specificity. This is a good group. 6 million. So Brian, you must be a Michigan fan. See what I did there? Come on, stay with me. So yes, it is true. Michigan fans do tend to have fewer neurons than Ohio State fans. You can tell what side of my loyalty is here, can't you? My daughter just graduated from the Ohio State, so sorry. 86 to 100 billion, right? Sorry, Brian. So I gained some credibility with a lot of people, and I probably lost some credibility with a few of you. We think most neuro researchers on this say it's between 86 and 100 billion neurons. All right. The neurons are the ones that are doing the firing and the wiring and the habits and the communication and all the stuff, right? Here's what happens as I'm firing those neurons together based on how we're interacting. Neurochemistry is happening. And there's a lot of different neurotransmitters, neurohormones, neurochemicals. We'll just call them all neurochemicals for a second. We're going to focus on these four for a minute because they're really important when it comes to how you communicate and how you're perceiving communication. Now, oxytocin, dopamine, adrenaline, cortisol. The top ones are kind of connected. So oxytocin is, we discovered it back when we were looking at when a mom would give birth to a child, both the mom and the baby had high levels of oxytocin. So we call it the bonding hormone, the bonding neurotransmitter. As we've studied it further and further, what we've learned is, regardless of age, gender, doesn't matter. If you and I are communicating and interacting, if both of us have this perception of care, connection, empathy, and trust, both of us have high levels of oxytocin in our brain. So we call this the trust chemical. Pretty important if trust is important. And I think we discovered earlier that it is. Dopamine is that reward chemical. So when my brain starts to process information and you're communicating with me, and I feel like I'm coming to these moments of aha where I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that answer. Oh yeah, we're talking about what I care about. Oh yeah. My brain starts releasing these little hits of dopamine. Keeps me engaged, but also gives me these rewards that I'm on track, that I'm engaged, that somebody cares about what I care about. So oxytocin and dopamine are both really, really important. Then adrenaline and cortisol, kind of on the opposite side of this, when you have some like that fight or flight mechanism gets triggered, your adrenaline kicks in, your cortisol spikes. So when cortisol spikes, that's the stress chemical. As you can see, there's stress, but it also helps us focus our attention. So interesting, isn't it? Cortisol is a double-edged sword. I need it. Right now, some of you need a little spike of it because you're drifting off and you're over there having some lunch and you stopped listening to me about 10 minutes ago. So I need to spike your cortisol. We need it because it literally does help us focus our attention. But too much of it floods our pathways, floods our system, our neurons, and causes us to actually go into distress. And once our cortisol is high enough, we actually can't learn anymore because we're completely in self-preservation mode. We can't make decisions to do something different that's creative and a new idea because we're in survival mode. Our decision-making comes strictly into survival if the cortisol is too high. So I'm gonna show you a commercial, and I'm gonna show you two actually. I want you to tell me what type of neurochemistry they were going for with each of these two commercials. We'll play the first one first, and you can kind of think to yourself of the top. We're going to go the top, oxytocin, dopamine, and then we'll do the bottom, adrenaline, cortisol.
Sometimes the little things last the longest. Give extra, get extra.
Hey, give me just a second. I should turn my camera off. That's a tough one, right? It's probably got a couple of you. It does get you. It hits you, doesn't it? Yes, obviously, Brian's tracking, so you can kind of see where we're going with that one. Now, we're going to do the quiz at the end here, but I think you guys are right on track with where we're going. Now, let's watch this one and tell me what you think this one was designed to do.
911, what's your emergency?
Hi, I've been in a car accident. My car slipped. There's water getting the car, and I can't get out.
911, what is your emergency? I came off paddleboarding, and a hard wind is pushing me out to sea.
Okay, do not hang up.
911, what's your emergency?
I'm here at the farm. I broke my leg straight down 21 feet. I sure need help quick.
Are you by yourself?
Yes.
Have you tried to get out? Have you tried to bust the window or something?
I'm pretty far out in the ocean.
I can't get to my cell phone. I'm talking on my Apple Watch.
Try to keep talking to me.
Okay.
I can't fight the wind anymore.
It's getting deeper. It's getting to my neck.
Please hurry. I'm hurting real bad.
You're going to seek help, okay?
I see them.
You're opening the door.
Hold on. Are you in an air pocket?
I'm just at the driver's seat.
Okay, so your head is above water?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I think we're on track here. I'm seeing them in here. That's just pretty consistent. Obviously, the first commercial, they were going for the oxytocin, dopamine. Whether they knew they were going for that or not is irrelevant. That's what they were going for. That's what they triggered. And by the way, Anthony, I feel your pain. With my oldest just graduating college and moving on to the next stage of her life. My son just started his freshman year at Cedarville University. So you feel it, right? You all the feels with that extra chewing gum commercial for sure. And Apple does a really, really good job here on purpose of trying to grab your attention, putting you in a narrative of survival, and then presenting, what they can do to actually help you in those situations. Well, what I want us to think about as we go through there, we're going to talk about the psychology now. Is so far we've talked about the biology with just the networks, analytical network versus emotional empathic network, and then within the biology we've got physiology that happens. And we've got all kinds of emotions that trigger all kinds of neurochemistry based on how you're communicating with me. And as we start to think about how we're going to put all this together in a conversation with a customer, if we don't control all aspects of this, we're leaving it to their brain to do all the interpretation. And their brain is not going to necessarily give us the attention, give us the focus, create the level of emotion that we were intending most of the time. So you can start to see how this all builds together, right? And before we go into the psychology piece for a second, though, I do want to challenge you to think about something. You've probably been thinking about this through the lens of, how does this work in my customer conversation? When I say this, how are they thinking this? And when I present this, are they thinking that? Pause for a second and think about how you're feeling. Because all this is happening to you as well. So, when you're sitting in the car in the parking lot about to go meet with a prospect or a customer, and you start to feel your pits starting to get a little sweaty, not to get gross on you, but we've all had it happen, right? What is that? It's a physiological response to stress. Your cortisol's going up. And that's kind of where it's in your case, most people, it might ooze out of their ears. Yours might be oozing out of your armpits. It's a physiological response to stress And when we're in that situation, our brain processes everything through the fear in the emotional empathic networks, which actually activates our analytical network, because that's where knowledge is at. So all of our facts and figures. So we don't even realize it, but if those of you who've done emotional intelligence work, self-awareness of knowing that's happening can help you with self-management of that emotion. So you can start to take it a little bit of a deep breath. And I'm going to teach you in a little bit how to then transfer all of your empathy onto the customer so that when you actually get in front of them, you've reduced the stress in the environment as opposed to elevating it, because that's what we tend to do inadvertently. So we're going to put all that together in a little bit. Hopefully you guys are tracking with me. So psychology, I'm going to give you a few cognitive biases and shortcuts the brain's trying to do that can either be to your benefit or your detriment, depending on how it shows up. The first one is a little bit of we're kind of riding off the back of the Apple commercial there with the prospect theory. And some of you might know this work. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky actually won a Nobel Prize for behavioral economics with this work called the prospect theory. They were trying to find out, do humans make a decision to change more urgently if I keep giving them gain messaging of what they stand to gain if they change? And I'm going to simplify all this, by the way. You don't even have to go read Thinking Fast and Slow after the next 30 seconds. Or do they change more with more urgency if they see what they stand to lose if they don't change? And what they found was, if I give you the gain message, hey, here's all the things you stand to gain if you'll just do this thing differently. Humans, thousands again of people in this study, humans will give it, we'll call it 2 points of decision-making urgency value for a gain message. And then no matter how many additional benefits you give me, I don't give it any more urgency. However, as you might guess, if I switch and I talk about what you stand to lose if you don't change, the brain actually activates at twice the urgency to change. Now, before we go any further, I want to pause for a second so I don't get misinterpreted here. This doesn't give you a license to be a fearmonger. That's not what we're going for. What we're going for here is an understanding of the biology and psychology with a little physiology of what's happening in the brain. Because if the people that we're actually competing against in the sales marketplace, they've been trained the same way. Facts, figures, features, benefits. So when they go in to meet with your prospect, what are they going to talk about? Everything they know, gain message. So if you can do something a little bit different, you're going to look different. You're going to sound different. This isn't about the fear mongering, though. This is about getting all 6 points of decision-making urgency value. Here's what we want to be able to do. We want to be able to make sure we're helping them understand the problems that they're trying to solve and the costs associated with not solving them. And we can't move off of that to tell them what we can do to help them until we've already made sure we have their buy-in and alignment on it. Then we can talk about how we're uniquely qualified to solve those problems. Now, if you think about this, think about what we've learned about with the networks, the biology, and a little bit of the physiology and psychology here is products, by their very nature, as you're explaining them to me, require evaluation, analytical network. Problems, as we're discussing them together, by their very nature, activate what? Emotion, emotional empathic network. Makes more sense, right? And so I actually care about these problems. These problems have a direct impact on me. These problems are preventing me from accomplishing what I'm trying to do. There's a cost associated with these problems. It's very personal. It's emotional. So I'm in the right network of the brain. The minute you switch gears and start talking about your product, just know you're moving me to my analytical network. And so now you see why those who try to lead with product or lead with credibility, you're doing it in the wrong order again. Right information, right way, right order. So this is a great way for us to do that. Let's watch one more commercial where I don't think they knew they were using the prospect theory, but they are definitely using the prospect theory through storytelling.
When your cable company keeps you on hold, you get angry. When you get angry, you go blow off steam. When you go blow off steam, accidents happen. When accidents happen, you get an eye patch. When you get an eye patch, people think you're tough. When people think you're tough, people want to see how tough. And when people want to see how tough, you wake up in a roadside ditch. Don't wake up in a roadside ditch. Get rid of cable and upgrade to DirecTV. Call 1-800-DirecTV.
So they used a lot of humor as their emotion, right? But think about the genius of that commercial and that whole series they used to run years ago was they never placed their product or solution until when? At the very end. So they story told, they understood that your situation. They understood that you didn't like cable. They understood all these things about you. They used humor to lead up to that with the problem woven in to then don't wake up in a roadside ditch, right? Switch to DirecTV. Now, forget about whether you like DirecTV or not. If you think about that in terms of how we want to be able to communicate, they didn't fearmonger. They just story told in a way that engaged me and then went from risk of loss to gain. We have to be able to do the same thing in that order. And we're going to show you how to do that using NeuroSelling. Anthony, I agree. I feel the same about calling my wireless carrier. It's almost like fill in the blank, right? Fill in the blank of anything with customer service these days. We're probably all in the same boat. So let's talk about one more concept here on the cognitive biases or the psychological side of things. It's a really important one. It's called the anchoring effect. And the way that we describe the anchoring effect in a sales conversation is every human being, in order for me to make a decision to do something different, I have to have a relative anchor of comparison, period, or I don't understand something. So our brain is in constant comparison mode, right? That's part of the analytical network's function is comparison, analysis, and evaluation. But if I don't have an anchor, then I can't associate any emotion to know whether or not there's a benefit or a cost if I switch or don't switch to something. So a lot of anchors your prospects might have. They might have an anchor in price. That's a big one. They might have an anchor in expectations. They might have an anchor in previous experience with you or the competitor. They have lots of anchors in their mind. They come preset with anchors before you ever meet with them. A really, really great world-class sales professional knows how to actually set new anchors in the conversation as they go along. Because when it comes time for me to offer my solution and the associated cost, I need you to be comparing that against the right types of anchors, not the ones that are going to put me in a commoditized box. And so we're going to show you a little bit later how to do that as well. Anchoring effect is critical. And when you get into what you guys would probably call objection handling, we call it barriers to change. When you get into some of that, the reason that they have barriers to change or objections is emotional to them, because they're actually comparing it to the wrong anchor. And if you don't understand that, you're going to get stuck trying to convince them they should be doing something different, which is going to make me feel like you're telling me I'm stupid for doing what I'm currently doing, because that's my anchor. So start to think about in your life, practical applications of anchors. What do you believe? Because your beliefs drive our behaviors. Beliefs are anchors. So I believe that the Bengals are in trouble this year. I'm a Bengals fan. And even though they won last night on Monday Night Football, I believe we might be in trouble. Now, do I believe it enough to change my behaviors? No, I'll probably keep watching. What do you believe? Because your beliefs drive your behaviors. Your customers' beliefs in how they've been making decisions drive their current and future behaviors. So if you change the anchor, you change my point of view. You change my perspective, and I'm no longer comparing this to this over here. I'm comparing to something new. And I'll give you specific examples when we get into the framework in a little bit, but I just want you to kind of seated with what that might mean to you. All right. So this is a really important concept on retention in the brain, because for most of us who are in a professional sales role, we don't always get to talk to the decision maker, do we? We have to talk to a lot of influencers. In fact, some studies in the B2B space today have shown that the stakeholders or influencers involved has gone from like 3 to 7 to sometimes 11 people in a buying process. That's frustrating, I know. So it's critical and imperative that we actually know how to create a story in every step of our sales process that's easy to be remembered, recalled, and retold in our absence. So London Business School, as well as Stanford University, they looked at this a while back to say, how does the brain retain information based on how it's communicated? And they broke up 3 cohorts. They said the first group, they're only going to give them statistics. The second group, they're going to give them statistics and a couple of pictures. The third group, same facts or statistics, but just told through stories. And they brought them back in a couple weeks later and measured retention. Now, this may not surprise you based on what you now know as neuroscience experts. The stats alone group could only recall 5 to 10%. When they added a couple of visuals, it went up to 25%. But the group who they just gave the same information to through storytelling, 70% recall. So think how important this is to you as a communicator who has to have somebody else go to somebody else inside your prospect's company and tell the story on your behalf. Critical that you're able to do this through storytelling. Now, visualization is important. It's imperative. Dr. Jerome Bruner, kind of the godfather of cognitive psychology, he found that a fact is actually 22 times more likely to be remembered if it gets woven or anchored into some form of either narrative or visual storytelling approach. I find this to be true in our work. We've looked at it. We've studied it as well. But I always like to test the audience. So I'm going to give you another test for a second. And I want you to think back on the story that I told you about my papaw for just a second. And I want you to put the answers to these questions in the chat. How long was his driveway? Who remembers? Perfect. Does anybody remember what the vehicle was that sat at the end of that 50-yard long driveway? You got it, Stacy. Look at this. Green Silverado. Okay, we're going to go even tougher. Does anybody remember the day, month, and year that the climax of this story took place? This is a tough one. Ooh, look at this. Oh, Rachel and Stacy are right on top of it. Look at this. Now, why is this so important? See, I took those facts not to manipulate you all. By the way, it's even harder through virtual. That's why it's even more imperative that we do this. I put those facts into that story so that you would actually visualize and own the story, but then I wanted you to be able to remember specific parts of that story later so that I could kind of emphasize this point. Again, not to manipulate you. We like to say we're not here to manipulate, we're here to modulate. We want to be able to modulate the way your brain's processing that information. So if you think about your sales presentations and conversations, if you don't have them anchored in some form, an anchoring effect, some form of visual representation throughout of the key things you want the customer to remember, they're not going to. And they'll just discount you and they'll kind of forget about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we do that in a minute. So just in summary, we've been covering a lot. And again, I know it's probably feels like a lot, especially virtually. Hopefully you've got a lot of notes. We've talked about the networks, analytical, emotional, empathic. We talked about neurochemistry, how critical that is. And we talked a little bit about a few of the psychological effects that drive us to these shortcuts for good or for bad, depending on what point of view we have on it. So what we're going to talk about now is then how we move into the kind of more of the application side of things. I want you to keep remembering, I said this earlier, but I want to reinforce it and underscore it. When you are under some form of pressure, even if you don't consciously feel you're under pressure, if you're in a situation where there's anything that could be at risk, which by the way is every conversation you have in life, period, believe it or not, but especially in a customer conversation, your subconscious brain is driving the feeling of risk. You will communicate from your highest level training, knowledge, experience. So if we don't elevate our game so that our highest level of training, knowledge, and experience is just as much about the customer and what they care about as it is about what we know, we will always revert back to what we know, which is our stuff. Okay. So I want to keep underscoring that as we go, because this is what tends to happen. You engage with me, I'm your prospect. Your entry point of conversation is what? Data, information, because that's how you've been trained. Because I'm a nice enough person, I nod along. You take that nodding along as confirmation that you should just keep on going. So you give me more information, which causes more evaluation. We're in the analytical network. By nature, I get a little skeptical because you're starting to get into the place where I feel like you're challenging my current status quo and I don't like it. So I'm going to start resisting risk, perception, which is going to lead to usually some form of distrust, maybe rejection or no commitment. All because what you do, you right out of the gate, You created an environment where you elevated adrenaline and cortisol. Now, that can be an okay thing at the right time, as we talked about earlier. But because of the way you started the call out, elevated it through the process, you downregulated or suppressed my oxytocin and my dopamine. So as you can see, I have no choice but to biologically and physiologically resist change. And it's your own fault based on how you communicated with me. Now, some of you do the opposite. You start off here. Your entry point of the conversation is very personal and relational. It's kind of who you are. And you're so comfortable there that you kind of stick with it. And there's more personal stories and questions about my personal life and your personal life. And boy, we're going down this. Yeah, it's a superficial, casual conversation, but it's, it's personal. It's good. And that leads to general goodwill and some likability. And next thing you know, end result is we got a great connection, but what happened? There was no urgency for me to change because you elevated my oxytocin and my dopamine. I like you. Go have a beer with you. We can hang out, but you didn't create any tension in my current status quo that caused me to go, oh, I should probably think about doing something different. So whichever side of this is on, well, by the way, we see this through most people default to one network or the other, and they just stay in there too long. So what we want to be able to do is give you the tools to help you do what we call the emotion coaster. You got to enter into the emotional pathic network. And then the way that you communicate with me at the right time, the right information, you're going to activate my analytical network, but then bring me back down into the emotional empathic network. And you're going to if you keep riding this roller coaster in the way you communicate, my brain will naturally stay engaged and it will naturally process information the way it's built to do so that leads to change. Some of you do this intuitively pretty well, but because you don't do it intentionally well, you don't do it consistently well. So hopefully this is starting to see where it's all coming together. Now, what I'm going to show you now is we're going to get into activation, okay? We're going to show you the tools that we've used on these big companies around the world to help them understand how to communicate with their customers with a little bit more impact. Now, on the outset of this, I want to share with you how we literally go through step by step when we engage with these companies. And I'm going to give you a couple of exercises that we do with them that you'll be able to do right now. So if you don't have a pen and paper out yet, hopefully you do. Now's the time to get it out because I'm going to take you through some of these exercises. So let me give you the NeuroSelling, the story-based conversation framework. And on the surface, it might look simple, but as you start to dive into the chapters of it, you're going to see the complexity in it from a neuroscience standpoint. The very first step in our framework is create connection. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say build rapport. Most of us have been through some form of training in our career where we've been told to build rapport. Not a fan. And you know why I'm not a fan? Because building rapport tends to be about you. Check this out. Tell me if this looks familiar, sounds familiar. I'm going to walk into my first prospect meeting with a customer I've been trying to get a meeting for 4 months. Mr. Jones, I see you have a picture of a sailboat on your wall. Do you sail? Oh, I drink water. Hey, let me tell you about my watches. And I go into I got watches. We think we're building rapport because we're picking out things around their office or something that we're trying to make it. They've seen that movie 1,000 times before. They know what you're doing. Consciously, maybe not. Subconsciously, this is the deal. Salespeople come in, they call on me, they pick out the picture of my daughter in her cheerleading outfit and say, oh, my daughter was a cheerleader. Pick out the picture of the sailboat. Oh, I like to say it. It's superficial at best. But it's a little bit off-putting at worst, and you don't even realize it because they're not going to tell you that. You're just not differentiating yourself. So we will teach you a process. I'm going to save this process, this exercise for the very end today, which we're getting close to. We have a tool that we're going to teach you how to build your own, very own create connection story that you'll be able to use in any sales conversation, whether it be 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes. You'll be able to customize it for every situation you're in with a prospect. And it's built on the science. So then next, here's the big question, almost what I would say is $1 million question. I'm your customer. How do I know that you care about what I care about based on how you communicate with me? How do I know? Now, I ask this question a lot, Usually the answer I get is, well, I ask a lot of questions so that I can understand what you care about. Do you know that over the past 20 years, there's been so much research done on this, and we've done it as well? How does it feel if I started asking you a bunch of questions, if you're my customer? You're going to feel like I don't know much about you, especially because my questions in my needs analysis tend to be very self-serving and leading. So thank you, Sherry, very intrusive. So I don't believe that you care about what I care about. So how do we solve that? You actually have to care about what I care about before you walk in the door. So what we do is, and we teach these 2 steps in a very specific way. The first one is the prospect story. And the one that's linked to it is the problem story. Now, on the surface, again, it sounds simple, right? What we do with our large clients is we do a month's worth of actual customer research interviews. We get customers on the phone on a virtual for an hour, and we don't ask them about you. We ask them about themselves. Hey, tell us about your business model. Tell us how you all make money. Tell us your strategic initiatives. Tell us about the cycle that you go through. Tell us how you feel, act, and behave relative to decision making. Tell us about, and we just have a whole series of neurocentric questions to where at the end, we're able to actually pull all of that information out and create a virtual digital storyboard about a day in the life of that customer. How they think, how they act, how they behave, how they feel, how they make decisions in their world, their eyes, their language. Gosh, that's pretty important. Oh, and by the way, what are the threats and the risks and the problems and challenges that you face when we're asking these questions that might prevent you from actually accomplishing those goals? And they share all of that with us. Here's the interesting thing. When you know that information now, and I empower you with it, and you come in to meet with me, guess what happens? After we made a connection, instead of asking me a bunch of needs analysis questions, you start telling me my story. And then you start asking me questions about my story that you got right or wrong. My brain completely changes. It switches gears entirely. Empathy gets elevated. What happens to the brain here, and we're going to get into this, I start to feel like now, hey, this person might actually be able to help me. We're going to get into that. Then obviously, if there's still anchors there, we need to understand what's preventing the barriers to success. And at the end, it's a much easier path to commitment. So back to the prospect problem story, because that's going to be our first exercise. I started to explain it a little bit on how we do it and teach it, but what is the actual science behind it? Remember what's happening here. If I start telling you a story about you, your brain will elevate dopamine. Empathy gets activated. Connection gets deepened. I start to actually own that story because it's my story. I start to acknowledge that, yeah, this person knows quite a bit about not just me, but my company, my industry, my business. So your credibility actually goes up. That's all happening neuroscientifically. Then when I'm able to transition that down through great questions and present the problem story, what happens? See, I built a little trust already in step 1 with connection. I built even further trust by elevating that I understand your business, your world, and what you care about, so that now when I put your current status quo at risk with the problem story, your adrenaline does kind of get a little higher. Cortisol does kind of get created. Risk of loss does get established. There's a little bit of cognitive dissonance happening. But here's the beautiful thing. It's not towards me, the salesperson. It's toward the problem. Because you've built it and you've earned that. Now we're on the same side of the table trying to solve a problem together, as opposed to me trying to convince you that you should do something different. This is such a huge difference in the brain. You can literally see in the brain where the brain processes this information differently. So this is why we do the prospect and problem story in a storyboard. So at this point now, I'm going to have you guys do an exercise. If you're not, if you have questions, put them in the chat. If you really feel like you want to come off mute and ask a question during this, please feel free to do so. But I'm going to show you an example so you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you're going to do this for yourself and for your business and your company. We were engaged with a company in Europe a little while back. They just happen to sell big green tractors. I won't say who the brand is. And this company was having a difficult time in Europe because they weren't as well known as they are in the United States. They just happen to be 20% higher priced than everybody else in Europe, but yet they don't have the brand equity, so they were having a tough time. So when we met with them, one of the first questions I asked the executive team was, tell me a story about your customer. These are the leaders over there, by the way. And they kept defaulting back to, well, we have this brand new model R7 whatever tractor. It has all this amazing horsepower, and they started just rattling off all this innovation that they had created. And I kept going back to, yeah, but tell me about me. They didn't quite understand what I meant. I said, see, here's the problem. You're out selling farm equipment. You're not out helping a farmer actually solve the problems they care about in a way that they think, act, talk, behave. So after doing the interviews, and by the way, a little bit of an advantage since I am an old farm boy, so I knew the answer. I'm going to show you the actual storyboard we created for them to show the farmer in Europe, in this case, that they cared about what they cared about. At the end of the day, what's a farmer's bullseye? What do a crop farmer, not necessarily an animal farmer, a crop farmer. At the end of a season, I have to make net income. That's how I survive. Well, how do I do that? What's my business cycle? There's a seeding and planting window. Then I go through fertilizing and spraying. Then there's the harvesting season. Oh, by the way, I have operational expenses throughout this entire process. At the end of that, it produces a crop yield. I take that crop yield and I go sell it, and I make net income. Now, we showed this to them and they were like, well, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course, this is their model. This is their cycle. Like, but you're not telling them this story. So they don't understand that you care about what they care about. Just by simply presenting this to them, this is the prospect story. They started to drive empathy. So now let's insert the problem story. By the way, did you know that weather impact over the past couple of years has significantly shrunk the window to get your crops in the ground? Did you know that, for instance, fertilizing and spraying costs have gone up 110%, and it's sourced World Bank? Did you know that 1% per day of yield gets lost for every week the planting window gets delayed? Pretty significant. By the way, did you know that these downtime, unplanned downtime, the hidden maintenance it cost can cost a farmer $2,200 a day? Did you know that? They didn't, by the way. Did you know that fuel costs are up 75% year over year, which is producing what? Less crop yield. And at the end of the day, less net income. Now, pause for a second, because I'm using this as a very generic, general exercise for you. Fent, Franz, you're right on the money with Fent. Fent was eating their lunch over there. So now think about this. If you sell something to a farmer and you understand this whole cycle and story, would you sell it differently? So I'm going to give you a specific example now, and then you're going to build your own, of how another client that had us come in and speak recently sells to a farmer here in the States. After showing them this, they sell a product that's like diesel. So let me show you how it all connects now. That's different. So they sell diesel fuel into these farmers. And here's what their sales page looks like. And they were going in telling them, hey, since 1952, we've been the gold standard and you should buy our fuel. After the prospect problem story, look at what they were doing differently. Now look at this, restoring lost horsepower. What does that mean? Oh, it means you can get in and out of the field quicker when there's a shorter planting window, so you don't have a reduction in yield. What about improving fuel efficiency? Oh, directly impacting the exceedingly high cost of fuel, reducing that expense for you. What about protecting the complicated fuel systems of today? Oh, we know how to help you not have this unplanned downtime, which is costing you thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So now everything that they were talking about before is connected directly to a problem that's connected directly to a goal that the farmer was trying to solve. Now, I like to use the farm analogy because it's very generic and probably nobody on here has it. You have a different one. So now let's do it. Let's do it for you. I want you to get your notes out, and I'm going to give you a minute or two to do this. And I'm going to have somebody come out off mute and tell me what they came up with. This is a generic template. Most business models can be boiled down into 5 or fewer steps. If you've got one that's longer than that, you've overcomplicated. You need to consolidate. As you think about the prospects and the customers that you call on in the industries you call on them, what's their bullseye? What is it that they are trying to accomplish at the end of the day? What's it leading to? And maybe it's throughput if it's a manufacturing company. Obviously, throughput equals profitability equals revenue, all those things. Those are probably always some type of the bullseye. How do they get there? Starting with step one. And then how does their process work? Not their individual role. So if you're talking about a procurement person, not their individual role yet. This is kind of level one. How does their business actually operate? How does it function? How do they make money? How do they go to market? What does it look like? What do they make? What do they produce? What do they sell? How does it work? So take a minute and think about how would you, in your paper, just draw your steps out, draw your bullseye, and think about your ideal prospect, the company that you would like to break into, and build yourself a prospect story. What are their goals and objectives for each step in their business model? Take a minute and do that. If you have a question, please put it on the chat and I'll monitor it while y'all are working for a few minutes. By the way, don't expect that you're going to get this done perfectly in 5 minutes. Absolutely, Anthony. Question around support instead of sales can be adjusted for retaining current customers. 100%. Think about NeuroSelling. It's the same as NeuroServing. You still have to understand this customer process, their model. Even though you've already sold something to them, my guess is you probably have a responsibility for identifying additional opportunities within that customer base, but also how to keep them renewing. When you're talking to them, you should always talk to them in terms of, here's the goal you were trying to accomplish initially. Here's the problem of what you brought us in to solve for. Here's how well we're doing to solve it. You get the idea, right? Or how well do you think we're doing in solving it? You should always go back to, here's your prospect story. Here is the problem story you brought us in for. Here was our solution. If you keep reminding them of that cycle, they will continue to believe you care about what they care about, making it tremendously more likely they'll renew with you and or give you more opportunities if you have other products or services to sell into. When companies don't do that model on the service side, it always amazes me that they get a little bit of churn and they don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, the customer, they didn't renew. When's the last time you reviewed their prospect story, problem story with them? We don't. We just check in and see how they're doing. They don't have a good anchor. So then they get bored. They look for other solutions. So yes, is the short answer. I gave you the long answer. Surprise, surprise. While you're finishing up there, it also on the customer service side is helpful to use these techniques when customers call in with issues. Issues are very emotional. Challenges from them are very emotional. So they're going to call in and your cortisol is going to get spiked because you're going to have a fear risk of loss that you're going to irritate the customer and they're going to cancel. So learning how to self-regulate their emotion when they call in with a problem that's emotional and helping them take them back to the prospect story, problem story, and then addressing the situation effectively with integrity lowers everybody's cortisol. And you are directly responsible for helping do that, which is great. Or the other way, sometimes we continue to mutually elevate cortisol and it turns into conflict. Take one more minute, and then I'm going to ask somebody to come off and just give us a little bit of an example of what they came up with their prospect story and what the business cycle for them looks like in their customer. By the way, this is a chance to get some free coaching for what it's worth. We're going through this exact thing right now, literally as we speak, with one of our big clients, GE Aerospace, where we're doing their global sales enablement. We've done 20 interviews of airlines around the country, and their ideal buyers that they work with. And we're building these storyboards out with them now. So we're right in the throes of this with a good example. So we'll be able to give you some real-time coaching for your business model as well. Okay, I think Aaron has it set to where you guys can come off mute. If somebody would like to come off mute, and you're welcome to turn your camera on, or you can leave it off if you'd like, and share with us what you came up with on this and the idea behind it. Who's going to be our guinea pig today?
I did allow unmutes, but if anyone has trouble, let me know and I can do it.
Yeah, if you're having trouble, put it in the chat, please.
By the way, this is another perfect example where your brain right now is processing the risk subconsciously of coming off mute. You can feel yourself getting a little pity, even in your own home office, that, oh, this is risk. If I come off mute and I do this, your brain's processing through all the neurochemistry we talked about earlier. So I'm going to challenge you to regulate that, take the chance, come off and discuss with the group what you came up with.
I have a question while they're thinking about this and somebody's getting up the nerve to do this. Is your process wrong if you're struggling to define 1 and 2?
1 and 2 meaning, say that again?
On this exercise, I always look for my end goal and work backwards. So working from the forward to the end goal, I'm struggling to define my 1 and 2 as somebody who works to generate donations from our alumni.
So this is perfect. Okay, so let's use this one as an example. So your role here is to influence, let's just say, high net worth individuals who want to donate to Franklin University, their alumni. I mean, you don't even care if they're high net worth. You care they have some worth, right?
I care a little.
You care a little bit. So in this case, because this is a little bit of a different situation, what's the bullseye?
Bullseye is that donation. You want the larger gift.
No, see, that's your bullseye.
Oh,
What's their bullseye?
Gotcha. I am looking at it wrong.
See, this is perfect, right? But it's a perfect example, Sherry, of when we tend to do that, right? We like, okay, what's my process? Like, what do I do to get them to my bullseye? No, it's what do they do to get to their bullseye? So in this case, let's just use you for an example, and then somebody else can jump in. If the bullseye for me in this situation as a donor is, I am emotionally connected to the value that I want to personally represent in my own brand to help the next generation get educational resources to live out their purpose in the world. That's the bullseye that you want me to have, that I should have if I'm a donor. Sure. So then what are all the options and then the problems that prevent me from doing that? Right. So part of it could be the whole process is I don't have enough information.
Yeah.
There's not enough knowledge. I'm spread too thin. I'm pushing donations in different places. I don't know. There's a lot of different things in the steps that might then, if my bullseye doesn't change.
Brian, please feel free to share. I would love to have somebody else be that.
No, it's great. It's great. It's a great example.
No, this
Brian,
is very helpful. I'm kidding. This is very helpful.
Go ahead, Brian. What do you got? Brian's having trouble unmuting, Aaron. I don't know if that's a...
Let me see if I can get him on.
Yeah, let me see if we can get him here.
And then Sunita, come back to me on your comment. I want to bring up that again in a second.
Are you able to help him, Aaron?
Yes, I believe so.
You hear me now?
Yep, got you, buddy.
Okay,
Thank you, Brian.
Great. Sure. My example is a little simplistic. We're basically a brokerage that brings new products to market in the CPG food industry. So for my steps 1 through 5, I put down purchasing, getting a store. The store wants to purchase the correct products that fit their customer mode, that fit what their customers are looking for. The second step would be getting them in on, cutting them in on the shelf, getting them on display. The third would be maintaining and merchandising the products on the shelf. Fourth would be promoting the products to their customers. And fifth would be reordering. And the net goal is to get faster turns on product with or at their adequate margin. So making an adequate profit, but turning product and getting it reordered faster, not letting it sit on the shelf.
So first of all, great job. And it's not too simplistic. One of the things that we work really hard on with our clients is actually getting it simplistic so that the customer can really recognize that you've simplified it for them. It's easy to understand. And within the steps, I don't know if they're all right or not. They sound pretty accurate. I would say in the first step is, as a customer of yours, I'm looking for, either new ideas for new products or improvements to the existing products. And I'm finding that information through a different series of sources, both from the, customer research, consumer research itself, as well as people like yourself bringing ideas, my own internal team. And once that identification has been made in step 1 of the need for a new product or a new SKU, then step 2 becomes what you said, right? We go through the process of vetting it through our system, just like you said, all the way down through then either identification, delivery, logistics, all that stuff. Now, when you come to me, who do you typically call on? You call on a buyer?
Correct.
So
buyer or a manager.
Buyer or a store manager? Yep. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So when you come to me, instead of just showing me what you have, you say, I'm going to teach you the personal connection story in a second. You're going to drop a little pat ball on them, and then you're going to connect with them. And then you're going to say, okay, yeah, listen, I don't want to just overload you with all the things that we have. Rather, I want to make sure I understand your world before I communicate anything from ours. If I were in your shoes, here's kind of what I'd be thinking about. Well, you've got a whole host of products. You got 37,000 SKUs you're responsible for. You're trying to every day figure out how do you have the right SKU on the right shelf in the right store at the right time for the right price to make a profit. Well, you got to identify the right SKU with the right provider that actually is something your customer cares about. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a narrative that they're going to go, oh yeah, check, check, check. And I just showed them that I think I understand what they care about. And then I'm going to narrow it down and say, so if I were in your shoes, these would be the top 3 things I'd be focused on. I'm going to pause and I'm going to say, did I get any of that right? And they're going to get a big smile on their face and go, yeah, you got a lot of it right. Though I am working on this, that, and the other. And they're going to give you 2 more things that you maybe didn't even ever consider and go, oh, perfect. Then you're going to move to the problem story, which is whatever you think that is. It prevents them from accomplishing what we just talked about that you can help them solve. And then you're going to ask them questions about that. And you're just leading them right down the path in a healthy way that's going to lead to mutual benefit. But I think you're spot on. I think you did a great job overall. I would have to look at it and do a little more digging. And obviously we would want to do more customer input and research on it to validate it, but it sounds pretty accurate to me.
Cool.
Does this make sense to everybody? Conceptually? Now, Sunita says something in chat about do the storyboard with them. 100% agree, by the way, because not all of you are going to be able to hire a firm like Brain Trust to go do 20 interviews and hundreds of hours of work to create the storyboards for you. So the best thing you can do is go talk to a handful of customers and simply tell them what you're doing. Say, I really want to try to understand your business better instead of just coming in and sharing with you what I have to sell. Here's what I think your company does and how you do it, but can you help me kind of populate this thought out? They're more than happy to. It works almost as effectively because they realize you actually are trying to understand what they care about. And then what are the threats and the risk and the problem? They'll help you do it. So I couldn't agree more with you, Sunita. If you can't have somebody in your company or outside your company come do this work for you, do it with your customer. And here's what I've learned, and I'll give you this. If you think, well, I got to do this for 8,000 customers. No. If you probably sell into 1 or 2 or 3 specific industries, specific industry types, specific customer types. Once you know one of them, you likely know all of them. So you only got to build 1 or 2 or 3 storyboards. And the personas that you call on inside of that storyboard, that's where your specificity comes from. So let's say in Brian's example, he calls on store managers who are doing consumer goods. He has a store manager, he might have a buyer. Well, the buyer, the purchasing person, and the store manager, they might have different priorities, but they operate in the same business cycle. So once I understand their business cycle, and then I understand their role, level 2, I can start to talk to them about their role within the business cycle. And they think even more highly of me. That's how you build a prospect problem story effectively, and then never come off of it. Never come off of it. And always go back to steps 2 and 3, prospect story, problem story, every single time you meet with a customer before you ever open your mouth about something you can help them solve. Because that sets new anchors. Because now the anchor is their bullseye, what they care about, what they're trying to accomplish, their goals and objectives, and then the problems and challenges and the costs associated with those problems and challenges that prevent them from actually accomplishing those goals. Now, every single thing I present is going to tie directly back to those problems that help them accomplish those goals. Okay. So let's move on as we're running a little bit out of time. There's the problem story. As you can see, we're going to weave in. The best way to get the problem story is just honestly, Google it. I say that kind of tongue in cheek. Once you know the role in the business cycle, go find third-party insights. There's plenty of them in every industry. We've yet to encounter an industry in a decade plus where we couldn't find third-party insights that highlighted a problem. Go find third-party insights, just like I did in the problem story for the farmer, that shows, hey, I think I understand this problem. In fact, here's what I think it's costing you. And then you ask your insightful questions around gaining confirmation. Okay, so now as we go to wrap, I'm going to give you your last assignment. Let me address Brian's real quick here. Seems like there might be alternative storyboards if there are specific segments of your customer base, different regions, different types of retailers using different distributors. Yes and no. The level 1 business cycle storyboard probably is very similar. The nuance comes in level 2, to your point. Could be some regional differences, persona differences, etc. So, okay. None of step 2 or 3 or 4 matters if you don't get someone to trust you on a personal level. So what we have taught and coached now thousands of people to do around the world is to create that personal connection story. See, as human beings, we just want to know that we're relatable and connectable and that I can trust you personally before I care about whether you can help me professionally. So this story that we teach starts with you build it with a series of steps. I'm just going to give you the 3 steps. And remember what we're doing here from a neuroscientific standpoint. Driving oxytocin, creating empathy, de-escalating risk, and establishing personal trust. First thing, what are your values? What are your beliefs? What are your personal characteristics? Now, it's a big question, isn't it? When we coach this to professionals, what we ask them to do is, then we might give them a list of 50 or 60 typical values or beliefs. It's not the end all to be all. What are yours? And we have people winnow it down and say, what are your top 10? Then what are your top 5? And then what are your 3 to 5 that you think really represent who you hope you are and how you show up every day? And the best way to do this is, and not to get a little morbid here, but here's the way that I coach it. I want you to think of your best couple of friends in your life. If they had to get up and eulogize you, and they had to describe you with 3 to 5 personal characteristics of who you were every day to them, what would they be? What do you want to be known as? Now, stay with me on this exercise, because not only is it pretty powerful and reflective, it's going to lead right down the path of a really authentic personal connection story. So if you kind of reverse coach me on my Papal story, my personal connection story, what were some of my personal characteristics or beliefs? Hard work, problem solving with curiosity and creativity, the platinum rule, and family. My guess is you probably share those beliefs. This is the other tip. Make them universal. We tend to steer people. Look, I'm a person of faith. I don't lead with that. I have a political view. I don't lead with that. The reason I don't weave those into my story is because, number one, you don't care. And number two, there's a 50% chance that you'll be the opposite of me on one of those two. Well, if my goal is to connect with you, because as a human, I do care about you. As a human, we do have a lot of things in common, way more than we have different. So pick those characteristics, values, or beliefs that are universal in nature that still represent who you are. Winnow it down. What are your 3 to 5? Now, step 2, where'd you learn them from? We call this part of the exercise sages and stages. Now, what we have found, and we believe this to be pretty true across the board, is most humans, their value system, their belief system was established in the first stage of their life, which is generally from birth to around 18 or 20. Then the next stage in your life, you're kind of trying to figure things out. Some of you might be in there right now. And then the third stage of your life is kind of the rest, from college to your first job to then where you are today, or wherever you're, the next stage of your life. You have sages that might come along in those stages in your life, but the powerful connecting stage is that early one, because that's where you kind of inform these beliefs. Then they get reinforced and reinvested in as you go through life. So who was that first stage sage to you? Maybe you have a couple. Maybe you can't think of any. And we get a lot of questions here over the years on, well, I didn't have a papaw. Well, guess what? You had somebody that informed these through observation, if nothing else. I promise you, we've yet to encounter someone who doesn't have a story here and a person who helped influence their life. The other question we tend to get sometimes is, but I don't want to pick, Grandpa Joe over Grandma Jane. I can't pick. You don't have to give this story at Thanksgiving. This story is just about who you're going to use to tell your story to connect with someone in a customer conversation or in an employee conversation internally. Who was that person? And then what was the story? If you think about the belief and how they showed it to you, how you observed that belief, give me the visual representation of it. So when I tell you my story of riding around on the tractor, standing between Papaw's knees, and him being a communicator and a storyteller, the hard work and the farm, and like there's visual aspects to my story that anchor those beliefs into reality, that take you along that journey with me and make it much more authentic and believable. So just give me some examples of it. That's all you're looking for. And then what I tell people to do is just free write this thing. Go stream of consciousness. Free write this story out. It could be 10 minutes long. And then cut it down into where you can make it even 30 seconds if you wanted to. Generally speaking, what we teach people in a sales conversation is when you open with your personal connection story, it should never be longer than 2 minutes. If it gets longer than 2 minutes, it starts to become too much about you and not enough about the customer. Because remember, the reason I'm telling this story is to generate an environment of authenticity and trust. Show you where I'm coming from, who I am, what I'm made of, so that it activates in your brain the exact same framework. You know how many Papaw stories I've heard over the last decade on airplanes, in hotels? Because whenever someone says, hey, so what do you do? I don't say, well, I'm the founder and CEO of Brain Trust. We're a neuroscience-based communication company that help people communicate with more purpose, power, and impact in the sales conversation and the coaching conversation. Never would I ever do that. I say, well, you probably don't care about what I do, but I'll tell you why I do it. I'm actually an old farm boy, and I grew up and I tell a 2-minute version of my Papaw story. And every time, someone will go, wow, it's amazing. You know what? I had a grandpa like that. And all of a sudden, this complete stranger shares with me a part of their life that they would have never in a million years shared. And the environment changes. And now we can have a more impactful conversation next. Okay, so that's your roadmap. Take a screenshot of that if you'd like. It's right out of one of our tool builders. Go build this story, practice it, think about it, and try it. Take a little risk. We've had the most hardened, ardent, this will never work, 30-year sales vet. Try this, changed everything. So this will set a new tone for your conversation with your customer and will clearly put you in a situation that's different than other salespeople. Okay. Leave a few minutes here at the end. I know we're running out of time. We're going to skip Tommy Boy in the interest of time, and we're going to take some questions.
As people are entering their questions into the chat, let me just say thank you. I scribbled lots and lots of notes, and you're kind of turning my approach on its end because I want to think about things differently. So thank you. I I always do this. I have all these ideas. I hope I stick with it. I hope I actually use it the right way. So thank you. For everybody who is attending, if you can please take a moment, in about 2 or 3 minutes, you're going to receive a survey that asks you what you thought about today. Please let us know. I do share that information with Jeff so that he knows what you guys thought about his presentation as well. If I had to be a betting person, I would say everybody loved it. So much great information. It's always a little scary when you see the word science, but I think you put it in a way that I think we can all understand how to use it in our day-to-day life.
So on the survey, words like charming, insightful, like any of those big adjectives you guys can think of, it's really helpful for me. Affirmation is my love language. So
I was going to say, I'm hearing a story tell here.
Yeah, be real with me. I love the feedback, and I'm always looking to improve the way that I teach this stuff as well.
Well, I'm not seeing any new questions, and I'm going back through the chat to make sure somebody didn't put one in earlier and I missed it. I did like your story or your movie references. Big
Gotta
time
leave those in. I'm showing my age though. I'm gonna have to start getting some more modern movies for the younger generation.
If you start putting in there Sigmund and the Sea Monster, we'll really know your age. That's a way call out. That's way back.
Yeah, that's right. And for those who are still hanging on the line, if you do like podcasts, our podcast, the Driving Change Podcast, is a really fun kind of human interest podcast with some really, really unique guests with amazing stories on there. So
I'm writing that down for myself. We are not sending out the slides. That wasn't our intention, but I will tell you this is being recorded. So this will be, once we make sure that's ADA compliant, we'll put it up on our website. If you go to our leadership center and click on sales series, this will be posted. Usually takes about a week or two to get us to get that cycle back, but it will be up on our website.
We'll have it up in about a week or two. And
Thank
leadership.franklin.edu.
yeah, and Jenny, if you're in chat, can you just throw your email in the chat real quick? If anybody has any other questions offline that maybe they just didn't want to ask online or in the chat, or just want to contact us later, just feel free to email Jenny directly on any of that.
Thank you. One quick question. When it comes to third-party customer insights that you're collecting, are you doing interviews with people who you think are customers, or getting info from the prospect and then going and talking to their actual customers?
Let me make sure I understand the question, Stacy. So third-party customer insights. Third party, what we do is, this is very, very good question. There's different types of insights. There's customer insights, and then there's problem insights. What we're talking about today is more problem insights, where we go out and we kind of mine the universe of studies and surveys and different things that actually highlight and underscore a particular problem that a customer might have, not necessarily customer behavioral insights. Those are the things we do in our interview process ourselves with customers. I think I'm answering your question, but I'm not sure. Did I answer it?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Stacy, for the question.
Yeah, great question.
Well, you said you would go slightly over your segments, and you did it perfectly. We're exactly at 1 o'clock.
Probably people need a mental break now. I give you permission. Go take a walk. Take the rest of the day off.
Hey, don't hear that, Aaron. You didn't hear that.
Never.
I'll come off a share now if we need to.
Or two.
For those still hanging on,
Great,
by the way,
Tiffany.
we've seen this work exceptionally well in job interviews. If you think about in NeuroSelling, you're actually selling yourself in a job interview. How many of you actually go into the job interview knowing the prospect and problem story that your role is going to be solving if you got hired? It changes the entire dynamic of an interview as well.
I have one time in my many years of interviews, one time had a friend who had a connection and said, this is why they're hiring, this is what they're looking for. And knowing that completely changed my level of confidence walking in there because I knew what they needed and I knew how to respond to what they were saying. So to your point, in an interview, I think it's a great piece of clarification to have.
It's really huge. My daughter's fiance also graduated and was looking to he's an architect. And so rather than him go through the process like everybody else, I taught him how to go do basically neuro interviewing. And he went into the interview with these architecture firms as an expert in the business of running an architecture firm versus looking to be hired as an architect. And he got offers from every single interview that he got because they were like, how's this 22-year-old kid understand our business this well?
That's incredible.
We just did a prospect problem story for him. And then he used that as part of his interview.
Aaron, you are not to talk to Jeff about how to become my replacement. Although you could do it in a heartbeat. I think we have